think it's 4.5 hours later, 4 hours and 50 minutes later, we're burgered out. Could I just thank, first of all, the Minister? Could I thank the Minister and Professor O'Reilly and their colleagues for their full and frank engagement? We said before the meeting started that we would endeavour to proceed a line of dialogue and questioning with yourselves that was to try and establish what the facts were, not to be political about it and to try and not to say anything that would provoke a negative impact or impression of the Irish industry, and that all of us collectively have a concern that we can move on from this as quickly as possible. So I think everybody, I'd like to compliment all the members of the committee for engaging in that spirit and in that manner. I think it's quite clear that this process needs to be concluded as quick as possible. It does need to be evidence-based. I think that's the first thing that we should really decide on, that we all agree upon, that it has to be evidence-based, that decisions are made on evidence as opposed to anything else. I think towards the end of the discussion, the Minister touched on something which I believe firmly, that if there is an issue about establishing the source and the core of this, if it is that from all of the investigations on this side that it's Polish, that there is a role if a labelled product comes in certified through another EU member state, that either the European safety people or DG Health or whomever it is has a responsibility to take some ownership of it, because I'm not so sure that we can cross legal or policing boundaries here. In the first instance, it may not be a policing thing for Poland. It could be somewhere else that we don't know. So I think we have to use the authorities from the labelling, go after the label if it's the label that's wrong. And I think just on the pack, because it has been raised here quite a bit about the whole the relationship between the cheap products and price of input costs increasing, and the competition that goes on amongst the multiples and the retailers. And that's a conversation, and unfortunately for us, we had an agreement to bring in a number of the multiples over the next 3 or 4 weeks, well, from 2 weeks from today onwards. And they have said now that in the light of this they would rather defer that for a while, which we can't really see the rationale behind, but be that as it may, because it is something that invariably drives people with the best will in the world to see if they can cut their input costs, and if their input costs doesn't compromise food safety but compromises food standards as we would see it, then that temptation will remain. But it is important at the end of the day to say that none of this and nothing that has gone on has threatened, as far as we can establish and fairly well establish, anything to do with food safety. And that's to be commended. The second thing I think that we should re-emphasise is this was self-diagnosis. It was determined within the state. And as the Minister and others have said, while it was ongoing investigations going on into it, it was actually our own systems that found it. And thirdly, Senator O'Brien put it very well at the end. This industry is something that we really need to be proud of, and the likes of Silvercrest and secondary processors are the ones that do the value added end to it. People who are in primary production, we have said for years we wanted to move away from selling, just slaughtered animals to the UK or wherever else, where the real value was added to it, that we want to do it here. So I think it's in our interest that if it is the most modern plant in Europe at least, that plant is put back into commission as soon as possible. So those are just my observations, and I'd like to thank all the members, thank the Minister, Professor O'Reilly, and all your team for engaging, and it was unfortunately delayed but worth waiting for, as they say, and that concludes the proceedings. Just